Hello everybody, I am Ankit Bharadwaj, your English facilitator. I welcome you all on my YouTube channel. So guys, today we are going to do chapter number 2 of your class plus 1. We are not afraid to die if we can all be together. So guys, this is an interesting chapter. So let us start with the introduction of this chapter, written by Gordon Cook and Alan East. This is the story about a 37-year-old businessman who is the narrator of the story. He has a wife whose name is Mary, and he also have two children, Jonathan, who is of 6, and Suzanne, who is of 7. He and his wife both dream of voyage around the world on their ship Wavewalker. So guys, Wavewalker is the name of their ship on which they traveled. That is 23-meter long, 30-ton wooden hulled, just like that of a famous captain James Cook. So guys, James Cook was one of the ship captain who traveled the world 200 years ago. सो उसकी वजह से इसको इंस्पिरेशन मिलती है राइटर को, और वो अब अपनी फैमिली के साथ जर्नी पे जाना चाहता है. So the whole family started sailing from Plymouth, England on July 1976. The initial phase of 3-year-long journey was from Africa to Cape Town. It was pleasant. While heading east along with two newly hired crewmen, strong waves hit them and their survival became a question. The story tells us about how they fought each day and survived till the end. So this is the story about how they encouraged themselves, how they struggled with those strong waves. Guys, I have also given you the summary of this chapter. If you want to read this summary, you can stop the video and read this summary. I have also explained this chapter in line to line. So let us start without wasting much time. In July 1976, my wife Mary, son Jonathan, 6, daughter Suzanne, 7, and I set sail from Plymouth, England, to duplicate the round-the-world voyage made 200 years earlier by Captain James Cook. For the longest time, Mary and I, a 37-year-old businessman, had dreamt of sailing in the wake of famous explorer. And for the past 16 years, we had spent all our leisure time honing our sea-suffering skills in British waters. Our boat Wavewalker, a 23-meter, 30-ton wooden-hulled beauty, had been professionally built, and we had spent months fitting it out and testing it in the roughest weather we could find. So guys, I have also given you the meaning of difficult words. So voyage means a long journey by sea or space. Leisure is a free time. Honing, sharpen, improving. Seafaring, regularly traveling by sea. Honing our seafaring skills. It's improving the skill required to travel by sea. Wooden hulled means a water light body of ship. So here we have explanation of this para. The narrator, who is 37-year-old businessman, along with his wife Mary and two children, Jonathan of age 6 and Suzanne of age 7, went on a voyage on their ship. Voyage means, as I told you, a long journey by sea. On their ship in June 1976, they started from Plymouth, England. Plymouth is the name of the city of England, and they wanted to complete the sea trip around the world just like the one had been completed 200 years ago by the famous Captain James Cook. As I told you earlier in the introduction, that James Cook was a famous captain and he traveled the whole world 200 years ago. So he took the inspiration from James Cook and traveled with his family. The narrator and his wife spent 16 years improving their seafaring skills. They got a ship built professionally, a 23-meter long, 30-ton heavy wooden hull called Waywalker. So they named that boat Waywalker. They took several months to test it in the roughest of weathers. So let us move to another para. The first leg of our planned 3-year, 1,05,000 kilometer journey passed pleasantly as we sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. There, before heading east, we took on two crewmen, American Larry Wiesel and Swiss Herb Siegler, to help us tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the Southern Indian Ocean. On our second day out of Cape Town, we began to encounter strong gales. From the next few weeks, they blew continuously. Gales did not worry me, but the size of the waves was alarming, up to 15 meters as high as our main mast. So guys, gales mean a very strong wind, and mast, that is the tall upright structure on a boat. बोट के ऊपर जो बड़ी सी एक जो है स्ट्रक्चर लगी होती है, जो आगे की तरफ एक बहुत सा पोल टाइप का कुछ लगा होता है, उसको मैस्ट बोल देते हैं. So here is the explanation of this para. The initial phase of 3-year long journey of 1,05,000 kilometer passed very pleasantly. They enjoyed actually that journey. They sailed down the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. The narrator hired 2 crewmen before heading towards the east to tackle the roughest sea, the Southern Indian Ocean. Their names were Larry Wiesel, an American, and Herb Siegler, a Swiss. On the second day in Cape Town, they encountered a strong wind which continued for several weeks. A strong wind was not a problem, but 15-meter high waves, which were the height of mast, worried the narrator. So guys, alarming means worried, okay, to give someone threat, okay. So these waves were continuously giving threat to the narrator. Let us move. December 25 found us 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town despite atrocious weather. Atrocious means very bad, very poor. We had a wonderful holiday complete with Christmas tree. New Year's Day saw no improvement in the weather, but we reasoned that it had to change soon. And it did change for the worse. So it became bad to worse and worse to worst. Okay. At dawn on January 2, the waves were gigantic. So gigantic means huge, in a very big size. We were sailing with only a small storm jib. Jib means a triangular staysail set forward the mast in a ship. So, and were still making 8 knots. So what are knots? These are the unit of speed equal to 1 nautical mile per hour, used especially of ships, aircraft or winds. As the ship rose on the top of each wave, we could see endless, enormous seas. Enormous means very big, very large. Okay, and rolling toward us, the screaming of the wind and spray was painful to the ears. To slow the boat down, we dropped the storm jib and lashed. Lashed means to hit with a lot of force. Okay, a heavy mooring. What is mooring? These are the ropes, chains. Okay, we can say in a loop across. What is loop? It is a shape produced that bend round and cross bent. The stern. Stern, it is the back part of ship. Then we double lashed everything. Went through our life rad drill. Attached lifelines, donned oilskins and life jackets and waited. So dand means put on, to wear, okay, पहनना. Oilskins means these are the heavy cotton cloth waterproofed with oil. So let us start the explanation. On December 25th, they had traveled 3,500 kilometers east of Cape Town. They celebrated Christmas together despite the bad weather, and they are hoping for the weather to become good. But although the weather changed, it became worst from worse. And that day, till the New Year's Day, they hoped it to change soon. As I told you earlier, the weather conditions changed. They become worst. On the early morning of January 2, the waves were very huge. They were sailing with a small storm jib at a speed of 8 knots. When the ship was sailing with huge waves, they could see the huge sea in front of them. The noise of the waves and strong winds was painful for the ears. They dropped the storm jib to slow down the ship and hit a heavy mooring rope across the black part of the ship in a loop. They lashed everything with double force. They put on their oilskin life jackets, attached lifelines, and went through the life raft drills and waited. So let us move to another para. The first indication of impending disaster came at about 6 p.m. With an ominous silence, the wind dropped and the sky immediately grew dark. Then came a growing roar, and an enormous cloud towered aft of the ship. Aft means near the stern of the ship. With horror, I realized that it was not a cloud, but a wave like no other I had ever seen. It appeared perfectly vertical, almost twice the height of the other waves, with a frightful breaking crest. Crest means reach the top of the wave. Impending means about to happen, something that is about to happen. Ominous silence, that is the unpleasant. It is like of threatening silence. Okay. Around 6 p.m., an unpleasant silence rolled over. It was an indication of disaster, which was about to happen. The wind suddenly dropped and the sky was darker with heavy clouds. A huge cloud was coming towards the stern of the ship, but later the narrator realized it was a huge wave. The wave was perfectly vertical and it was twice the height of the previous waves. They saw within the top of wave looking unpleasant due to its height. So the waves were too high. Okay. So all the things looking like a dangerous thing which is coming toward their family. Let us move. The roar increased. The roar, which thing they are talking about? These are the roar of the waves. Okay, they were roaring. वो उनकी जो आवाज़ थी वो इतनी ज़्यादा डेंजरस लग रही थी, वो इतना ज़्यादा रोर कर रही थी जिससे जो पूरा एटमॉस्फेयर था, माहौल था, वो पूरा डेंजर जैसा लग रहा था. The roar increased to a thunder as the stern moved up the face of wave, and for a moment I thought we might ride over it. But then a tremendous means very great amount, explosion shook the deck. Shook means shake. It means to vibrate something. Okay. A torrent of green and white water broke over the ship. My head smashed into the wheel, and I was aware of flying overboard and sinking below the waves. I accepted my approaching death, and as I was losing consciousness, I felt quite peaceful. So, guys, this is the para which changed everything. Okay, as the roar, it means as the waves were shaking, as the waves were roaring, okay, and the thunder was increasing at a great rate, they thought that it would not do any damage, but a huge explosion. Explosion means a type of bomb, okay, to explode something. So they heard a explosion which completely vibrated their deck. What is deck? It is the floor of the ship. Okay. A strong moving stream of green and white water broke over the ship. The narrator's head smashed in the wheel of the ship. He flew overboard and sank below the waves. He accepted that his death was approaching, he is gonna die, and started losing consciousness. He was becoming unconscious with that smash. He felt quite peaceful. So he was feeling quietness in his death because he accepted that he is gonna die. Okay, and he was completely enjoying, he was completely in a peaceful state of dying. Let us move. Unexpectedly, my head popped out of the water. A few meters away, a wave walker was near capsizing. What is capsizing? Be overturned in the water. Wave walker was near capsizing, her masts almost horizontal. Then a wave hurled her upright. Hurled means throw with a great force, to push. Okay. My lifeline jerked taut. I grabbed the guard rails and sailed through the air into wave walker's main boom. Subsequent waves tossed me around the deck like a rag doll. My left ribs cracked, my mouth filled with blood and broken teeth. Somehow I found the wheel, lined up the stern for the next wave, and hung on. Water, water everywhere. I could feel that the ship had water below, but I dared not abandon the wheel to investigate. Suddenly, the front hatch, what is hatch? Door, was thrown open and Mary appeared. "We are sinking," she screamed. "The decks are smashed. We are full of water. Take the wheel," I shouted as I scrambled for the hatch. So all the things were gonna smashed. All the things on the deck, all the ship things were gonna hodgepodged. The narrator's head popped out of water. The ship was about to overturn. What he saw, that the ship is overturning, okay, and suddenly another wave turned the ship upright. His lifeline jacket was stretched. He grabbed the guard rails and sailed to the ship's main pole. The waves tossed him around the deck. He was injured as his left ribs cracked, his mouth filled with blood, and he had a broken tooth. He found the wheel, lined the stern for the next wave, and waited. There was water everywhere, and there was water everywhere. The narrator could feel water below the ship, but he did not leave the wheel alone. Suddenly, the front door opened, and his wife Mary came screaming. She was shouting that they are sinking. Okay, the decks are smashed. We are completely in the water. The narrator handed her the wheel and climbed towards the door. Let us start another para. Larry and Herb were pumping like madmen. Broken timbers hung at crazy angles. The whole starboard side burst inwards. Clothes, crockery, charts, tins, and toys sloshed about in deep water. I half swam, half crawled into the children's cabin. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Yes," they answered from an upper bunk. "But my head hurts a bit," said Sue, pointing to a big bump above her eyes. I had no time to worry about bumped heads. After finding a hammer, screws, and canvas, I struggled back on deck with the starboard side bashed open. We were taking water with each wave that broke over us. If I couldn't make some repairs, we would surely sink. So let us start. The crewmen, Larry and Herb, were pumping the water very fast. They were throwing out the water from the ship. The timbers of the ship were broken and were hanging badly. The starboard of the ship had sunk. Clothes, crockery, charts, tins, and toys were roaming around in the deep water. The narrator swam and crawled to the children's cabin and asked the children whether they were all right. The children replied in a confident voice, "Yes, we are all right." But Sue, his daughter, complained that she was having pain in the head, and when he saw what he saw, that it was a big bump on her head. The narrator had no time to pay much attention toward that thing, and he found screws, hammer, and canvas. He went back to the deck. The broken starboard side was letting so much water in. If the narrator could not fix the problem, they would all sink in the sea. So let us start another para. Somehow I managed to stretch canvas and screw waterproof hatch covers across the gaping holes. Some water continued to stream below, but most of it was now being deflected over the side. More problems arose when our hand pumps started to block up with the debris floating around the cabin, and the electric pump short circuited. The water level rose threateningly, alarmingly. Back on deck, I found that our two spare hand pumps had been wrenched overboard, along with the forestay, sail, the jib, and the dinghies, and the main anchor. Then I remembered we had another electric pump under the chart room floor. I connected it to an outpipe and was thankful to find that it worked. So the narrator stretched the canvas cloth and secured the waterproof hatch which covered the gaping holes. Some water streamed below and some was now deflected over the side. The hand pump was blocked as rubbish was floating around the cabins and entered it. The electric pump short circuited. As the water level rose, the narrator found two hand pumps had been removed along with a rope, jib, a small boat, and the main anchor. He found another electric pump under the chart room. He connected it to an outpipe and it started working. So let us move. The night dragged on with an endless, bitterly cold routine of pumping, steering, and working the video. We were getting no replies to our Mayday calls, which was not surprising in this remote corner of the world. Sue's head had swollen alarmingly. She had two enormous black eyes, and now she showed us a deep cut on her arm. When I asked why she hadn't made more of her injuries before this, she replied, I did not want to worry you when you were trying to save us all. Mayday calls, words used to signal ships struck in a disastrous situation through radio. So these are known as Mayday calls. The whole night was about the endless routine of pumping out the water, steering the wheel, and working the video. There were no replies to their signals sent over the radio, as they were in the remotest part of the world. Sue's head was now more swollen and she had two back eyes with a deep cut in her arm. When, upon being asked why she didn't tell him about her injuries, she said that she did not want to worry him as Father, you were trying to save all of us. So she showed that how brave she was. She also helped her father by not showing her injuries. Okay, so let us move. By morning, on January 3rd, the pumps had the water levels sufficiently under control for us to take 2 hours rest in rotation, but we still had a tremendous leak somewhere below the waterline, and on checking I found that nearly all the boat's main rib frames were smashed down to the keel. So what is keel? It is the steel structure along the base of the ship. In fact, there was nothing holding up a whole section of the starboard hull except a few cupboard partitions. We had survived for 15 hours since the wave hit, but Wave Walker wouldn't hold together long enough for us to reach Australia. I checked our charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them, Isle Amsterdam, was a French scientist base. Our only hope was to reach these pinpricks in the vast ocean, but unless the wind and seas abated so we could hoist sail, our chances would be slim indeed. The great wave had put our auxiliary engine is a small secondary engine used to board ships to operate a windlass in the ship out of action. So the water level was under control by the morning of January 3rd. So all of them took 2 hour rest in rotation, but there still was a leak somewhere below the water line. Upon checking, the boat rib structure was badly broken down till the base of ship. The whole section of starboard was held together with a few cupboard partitions. The ship's condition was so bad it was becoming worse that it would not make it till Australia. The narrator checked the chart and calculated that there were 2 small islands a few kilometers to the east. One of them was Isle Amsterdam, which was a French scientific base. Their only hope was to search and reach that island, but only if the wind and the sea do not cause further damage, else their chances were slim. The wave had destroyed the ship's auxiliary engine. Let us move. On January 4th, after 36 hours of continuous pumping, we reached the last few centimeters of water. Now we had only to keep pace with the water still coming in. We could not set any sail on the mainmast. Pressure on the ringing would simply pull the damaged section of the hull apart. So we hoisted the storm jib and headed for where I thought the 2 islands were. Mary found some corned beef and cracker biscuits, and we ate our first meal in almost 2 days. But our respite was short-lived. At 4 p.m., black clouds began building up behind us. Within the hour, the wind was back to 40 knots and seas were getting higher. The weather continued to deteriorate throughout. Deteriorate means get worse throughout the night, and by dawn on January 5th, our situation was again desperate. So after 36 hours of continuous pumping, on January 4th, the water was only a few centimeters left to be pumped out, but they still had to pump out the water which was coming in. They could not set sail on the mainmast. They hoisted the storm jib and sailed towards the 2 small islands. They had their first meal in 2 days, in almost 2 days. Some corned beef and cracker biscuits found by Mary. The rest period was very short-lived, as black clouds built up around 4 p.m. The wind was now 40 knots and the sea was getting higher. The weather got worse, and by the early morning of January 5th, the situation was bad. Let us move. When I went into the comfort the children, John asked, "Daddy, are we going to die?" I tried to assure him that we could make it. "But Daddy," he went on, "we aren't afraid of dying if we can all be together." So guys, this is the tagline of our chapter also. Okay. So these lines were told by the son of narrator. "You and Mummy, Sue and I could find no words with which to respond, but I left the children's cabin determined to fight the sea with everything I had. To protect the weakened starboard side, I decided to heave to with the undamaged port hull facing the oncoming waves. Using an improvised sea anchor of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of paraffin, that evening Mary and I sat together holding hands as the motion of the ship brought more and more water in through the broken planks. We both felt the end was near. So when the narrator went to comfort his children, his son asked him whether they were going to die. He tried to assure him that they would make it. His son replied that they were not afraid to die till they all were together. This filled the narrator with the determination to fight back. He made efforts to protect the weakened starboard side. He used an improvised sea anchor made of heavy nylon rope and two 22-liter plastic barrels of kerosene. That same evening, the narrator and his wife sat holding hands, and they believed that their end was near. From the inner side, they knew that they are going to die. But Waywalker rode out of the storm, and by the morning of January 6th, with wind easing, I tried to get a reading on the sextant. What is sextant? An instrument with graduated arc of 60 degrees for taking altitudes and navigation. Back in the chart room, I worked on wind speeds, changes of course, drift and current in an effort to calculate our positions. The best I could determine was that we were somewhere in 150,000 kilometers of ocean looking for a 65-kilometer wide island. While I was thinking, Sue, moving painfully, joined me. The left side of her head was now very swollen and her blackened eyes narrowed to slits. She gave me a card she had made. On the front she had drawn caricatures. What is caricatures? These are the picture of person, okay, like a cartoon, and of Mary and me with the words, "Here are some funny people. Did they make you laugh?" I laughed a lot as well. Inside was a message, "Oh, how I love you both." So this card is to say thank you and let's hope for the best. Somehow we had to make it. The ship made it through the storm, and by the morning of January 6th, the narrator tried to get reading on the sextant. He worked with wind speeds, drift and current, with calculated their position. They were in 150,000 kilometers area of ocean looking for 65-kilometer wide island. While the narrator was still thinking, his daughter Sue joined him and she was in pain. The left side of her head was swollen and her blackened eyes had narrowed down to slits. She gave him a card which she had made herself. So on the front of the card was a cartoon image of her parents with words written about them being funny people and how they made her laugh. And after that, on the inside of the card, she told them how she loved them both and she thanked them. This made the narrator realize that they had to make it to the island. Let us move. I checked and rechecked my calculations. We had lost our main compass and I was using a spare which had not been corrected for magnetic variation. I made an allowance for this and another estimate of the influence of the westerly currents which flow through this part of the Indian Ocean. About 2 p.m. I went on deck and asked Larry to steer a course of 185 degree If we were lucky, I told him with a conviction I did not feel he could expect to see the island at about 5 p.m. Then, with a heavy heart, I went below, climbed on my bunk, and amazingly dozed off. When I woke, it was 6 p.m. and growing dark. I knew we must have missed the island, and with the sail we had left, we couldn't hope to beat back into the westerly winds. After that moment, a tousled head appeared on my bunk. Can I have a hug? Janardhan asked. Sue was right behind him. So the narrator rechecked his calculation. They lost their main compass and were using the spare one, which was not corrected for magnetic variation. He estimated the influence of the westerly currents which flow through the Indian Ocean. Around 2 p.m., he went on deck and asked Larry to steer the wheel to 185 degrees, and after that he felt it. If they were lucky, they would see the island by 5 p.m. Then he went below and slept. He woke up around 6 p.m. and it was dark outside. He thought that they might have missed the island. He started worrying about how they would tackle the westerly wind more, as the ship wasn't capable to sail more. His son came and asked him for a hug. His daughter followed. Let us move. Why am I getting a hug now? I asked. Because you are the best daddy in the whole world and the best captain, my son replied. Not today, John. I'm afraid. Why, you must be, said Sue, in a matter of fact voice. You found the island. What? I shouted. It's out there in front of us, they chorused. As big as a battleship. I rushed on deck and gazed with relief at the stark outline of Isle Amsterdam. It was only a bleak piece of volcanic rock, the little vegetation, the most beautiful island in the world. So he asked that why he was getting a hug. His son replied that he was the best daddy in the world and also called him the best captain. The narrator replied that he was afraid. Sue told him then that they had found the island, which was as big as a battleship. The narrator rushed to the deck and gave a sigh of relief. They could see the complete outline of Isle Amsterdam. There was a bleak piece of volcanic rock in front of them. It had a little vegetation. It was the most beautiful island in the world. Let us move. We anchored offshore for the night, and the next morning all 28 inhabitants of the island cheered as they helped us ashore. With land under my feet again, my thoughts were full of Larry and Herbie, cheerful and optimistic under the direst stress, and of Mary, who stayed at the wheel for all those crucial hours. Most of all, I thought of 7-year-old girl who did not want us to worry about a head injury, and of a 6-year-old boy who was not afraid to die. So, in this para, he tells us that they moved the ship at some distance from the shore, and next morning the 28 inhabitants of Amsterdam Island helped them to move on the shore of the land. As he felt the land again on his feet, he thought of his crewmen and his wife. He also thought of his 7-year-old daughter who was injured badly. She had to go through 6 minor operations to remove the blood clot in her head. His son, who never gave up and was not afraid to die. So guys, this was the chapter which we have in our syllabus. So this chapter tells us about the bravery, tells us about that we should not stop while doing hard work. Sometime, someday, we will definitely get success. So next we have the question answer. Let us do it hurriedly. List the step taken by the captain to protect the ship when rough weather began. The narrator decided to slow down the ship to protect it from bad and stormy weather. He dropped the storm jib and lashed a heavy mooring rope across the stern of ship. Then they double lashed everything. They carried their life rail, attached lifelines, donned life jacket and oilskin. Next point, to check the flooding of water in the ship. To check the flooding of water, the narrator put a waterproof hatch which covered the gaping hole. This diverted the water flow to the side. His hand pumps were blocked due to debris and his one electric pump was short-circuited. He found a hand pump and spare electric pump. He connected the electric pump to the out pipe and started it. So guys, we have already done a lot and this video is going too far. So why don't we do one thing? I'll just explain you the question and the answer here given to you. You can stop the video just to write the answers. Okay. So second question we have, describe the mental condition of the voyagers on January 4th and 5th. So here we have to discuss the mental condition from which trauma they were suffering from as on the date of January 4th and 5th. Let us move to third. Describe the shift in the narration of the events as indicated in the three sections of the text. Give us subtitle to each section. Guys, this you need not to do. Okay. So we are not concerned with this question in this chapter. You can leave this. Next is the talking about the text. What difference did you notice between the reaction of adults and children when faced with danger? Here we have to discuss about the reaction of the adults. Adults, who are the adults? The two of the crew member and the father and the mother. And who are the children? The daughter, the narrator's daughter and his son. So we have to just tell the reactions about their situations which they were suffering from. Okay, so that dangerous situation when they were in. So what were the mental condition of those adults and those children? So let us move. How does the story suggest that optimism helped to endure the direst stress? So guys, what is optimism? Optimism is a type of hope. Okay, so it is a state of hope. ये होप वाली सिचुएशन होती है. सो ये स्टोरी है, ये सजेस्ट कर रही है ऑप्टिमिज्म को. So you have to tell that although they have a lot of challenges in their life, although they have a lot of dangerous situation which they were suffering from, but the one thing that they always endured with is that optimism. Okay, so next we have, what lesson do we learn from such a hazard experience when we are face to face with death? What is hazardness? Hazardness is that difficult situation, that worst situation. So it was the worst experience of narrator and he was in face to face with death. So what is the mental condition of narrator and what type of lesson you will learn while reading this chapter? So already you have read that chapter, and what are the things that you have gained, that you have learned in this chapter? Okay, so next we have, why do you think people undertake such adventurous expedition in spite of the risks involved? So this is the very interesting question. So although people know that this thing is a kind of a risk and like people do a lot of things which are filled with risk, like mountaineering, mountain climbing, okay, and sea suffering, and a lot of things that are filled with dangerous situations, but the people always found it adventurous and they do it. Okay, so what is the thing that inspired them to do these type of things? In this question you have to write this. So with this, guys, we have done the explanation, line to line explanation of this chapter, and also we have covered her question answer, and I also have given you the summary of this chapter. If you want to read before line to line explanation, you can read this. With this, we have done this chapter. Goodbye, take care, stay healthy.